Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another election edition of Socialist Telly. And I think about half an hour's worth today. So if there is any football on, I'm not sure people can get away to watch that. I am joined by Dr Ammar, who is campaigning to become an independent MP in Birmingham Edgbaston, standing against Preet Gill, who obviously has the Keir Starmer stamp of approval to still be allowed to stand there and has taken a position on a few things that we here at Socialist Telly and Squawk Box would disagree with. So, Dr Ammar, welcome onto the programme. Hopefully you can hear us okay. You're joining us from your car there.
Yes. I've just driven to a spot with a better Wi-Fi, I think.
All right. Okay. Good stuff. So most people here probably won't know who you are from unless they live in Edgbaston. So give us a bit of a rundown as to why you're standing there and what you're standing for.
Right. So my name is Dr Ammar Waraich. I am primarily a physician. I specialize in neurology and stroke. I've worked as a doctor in the NHS for the last, nearly 15 years now. But additionally, I've worked as an academic and a clinical lecturer at the University of Birmingham. And I've also had training in political science and economics from Harvard University, which I attended as a Fulbright scholar. And my master's was in public policy there. So it's a mix really of natural sciences, medical practice, and then also political science. And so I was just working as a physician in the NHS. So waiting times have been going up. In the neurology clinic, waiting time can be up to 3 years sometimes. And patients who are waiting to see us in that time sometimes can really suffer a lot and sometimes accrue disability as well. If you go to the emergency department, the waiting time there is sometimes 12, 14 hours. So I've seen this. Actually, it wasn't like this 10 years ago. It wasn't like this 5 years ago. Things have been getting worse and worse. And when the election was announced, I was a member of the Labour Party and not anymore. But when the election was announced, I was expecting the Labour Party to announce something more progressive. And they really shied away and they only offered something very timid and meek. So I got talking to colleagues in the Edgbaston area and we said, look, who are you going to vote for? And we really couldn't find anyone to vote for. We said we should put up an independent bid. And together, we kind of came up with the idea of standing then as an independent here.
Okay. And on your website, it says that you stand for compassion, integrity, and independence. So, tell us what that means, and I guess even more importantly, why you think that's not there in the other candidates that drove you to stand as an independent.
Yeah. So I think that is something that I can practice as an independent candidate. If I was a party candidate, a party MP, I'm obliged to sell you the party line. And as an independent, I can be free of that. So, for example, if I was a member of the Labour Party, let's say, and I was standing as a Labour candidate, I would have to tell you that getting 6,500 extra teachers is going to solve the education problem that our school faces. Now, I'm a governor at 2 schools here locally, and I know that's far from the solution. Teachers are leaving in their droves because of the extreme pressures they're facing. And so, I'd have to tell you a line that I can't believe in. And as an independent, I don't have to do that. So what I mean by compassion is I can really, with humility, listen to the problems that people are facing. I do this anyway as part of my job as a physician, but I can, this is a different level of problems that I've encountered on the doorstep. I can listen to the extreme problems people are facing, from local council issues all the way to national policy. And then I can listen to it with integrity, by which I mean I'm not here to use that information to make a party line and sell them a party policy. So I can with integrity listen to that position. And independence, again, speaks to the fact that I can act free of the political party system and advocate for the changes that they want. And as an independent, the beauty of the system, the running as an independent, is that I can pick up issues that actually cut across party lines, and maybe one party would support, the other party wouldn't. I can make a manifesto or a policy platform that appeals to the whole electorate in Edgbaston.
Okay. And I noticed on your campaign video that's on your website, you are wearing a keffiyeh Palestine scarf. Tell us a little bit about what the position of your main political rivals there in Edgbaston has been on Gaza, and about your own stance on that.
Yeah. So look, for me, Palestine was the hammer blow that broke the camel's back. That's how I describe it, because before that I was in the Labour Party, and once the Gaza genocide started to unroll and it became apparent, and Keir Starmer gave that interview, despite that, where he said Israel has the right to withhold power and water from 2 million innocent citizens, 1 million of which are children. That was the hammer blow that just made me really upset that I was still within the Labour Party. And that very night, I actually left the Labour Party. And yeah, that's a very emotive and important issue for me. Like, to this day, there's scores of innocent Palestinians being killed daily for reasons which are not at all apparent. I mean, obviously, Israel's line is anything that they shoot and anything that dies as a result of their weapons is by definition Hamas. And that's their, way they define it, and they defend it. But to the obvious, to the neutral observer, it's apparent that who's actually dying, it's children, it's babies, it's women, and and it's innocent men, of course, as well, the innocent. So that was a hugely emotive issue that made me want to be more politically active as well. And in terms of the local constituency, the Green Party and the Liberal Democrats are, to their credit, they are in favor of a ceasefire, and the Green Party particularly is more, I think, more just in their position, asking for sanctions and for the International Criminal Court to prosecute. I'm not sure what the Lib Dem position is actually, but the Labour Party and the Conservative Party are both conspicuously silent. We had a special hustings on the Palestine issue, and both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, despite being present at every other hustings, were absent for that one. And the excuse they gave was that we have other events to go to. And residents who actually came to that hustings, they clarified that the Labour Party particularly wasn't at any event. They were instead out meeting the public and knocking on doors. So there wasn't an event. There was just an excuse to escape scrutiny on this issue.
Yes. Well, I think that's been fairly widespread as well, hasn't it? Because, I mean, we saw that last week we had on the candidate, the Workers' Party candidate for North Durham, who is standing against Luke Akehurst, who is a fairly fanatical supporter of Israel, works for a pro-Israel organization, and has his colleagues from there out campaigning with him, because they're, as far as I can tell, pretty much the only people who will, apart from a couple of councillors. And he didn't turn up to any hustings either, because I suspect for the same reason that he knows he's going to get a hammering. And we did see, I don't know if you've seen the video, but the MP for one of the Manchester constituencies, a former MP now, Labour candidate, who's a frontbencher, who got challenged by a doctor who had just come back from Palestine, why he hadn't answered any of his emails about the Israelis deliberately targeting the house where he and other British doctors were staying, and trying to blow them up as a deterrent to other doctors to stop them going there. So, when Labour candidates do turn up, then they do get a grilling. From a cold political point of view, it might be the right thing to do for them to not turn up, so they don't have to answer these questions. But hopefully everybody else is joining the dots and realizing that this is a political cowardice, because they're back in a position that really you can't justify.
Well, actually, on the doorstep right now, what we found out is that our local MP, she did not back a ceasefire initially when her job was on the line and the whip was bearing down on her. She did not by then. But now, miraculously, there's a new leaflet out saying, all this time we've been backing a ceasefire, we support XYZ, and apparently they support criminal, sanctions and arrest warrants from ICJ, but and immediate recognition apparently. But then Keir Starmer goes on the national media and says, "Oh, hang on, not quite yet. It's only after we have a negotiated settlement." So it's all very murky. It's all just triangulation, no moral clarity on this issue, and just posturing to try and get votes. But people aren't silly. We've had a lot of support actually in Edgbaston on the Palestine issue, and on that issue certainly, people are clear that we're the only real presence in terms of the electoral options for the constituents that unilaterally backs, the Palestinian rights in terms of like ceasefire, immediate recognition, full justice through the ICC and ICJ, cessation of weapons, and sanctions, and full and equal application of international law. Additionally, what we're saying, our campaign is saying, is there should be a full right to think, criticize, speak, assemble, protest. We need all of those rights to be preserved. The mainstream political parties, through calling us hate marches and mobs, those of us who protested, have really damaged the democratic fabric of our society. And we are saying that, look, we are standing up for those democratic rights in our campaign.
Yes, I mean, you're right that Keir Starmer's position, I mean, they made a manifesto pledge to try to con people to say, we'll recognize Palestine. But then they said, well, pretty much it boiled down to only when the Americans and Israel agree. And,
that's right.
It's if it has to be agreed by somebody else, it's not a right. It's a, that's being held out as a possible privilege. And the Israelis are quite clear that they have no intention of ever giving Palestine statehood. So if something's contingent on them agreeing,
that's right. Yeah,
it isn't going to happen.
And
I will just remind viewers who, they probably don't need reminding, but I will mention it that, Labour under Keir Starmer originally whipped MPs not to vote for a ceasefire, and did that, I think, at least twice. And then when it came down to the SNP's opposition day motion for, a full ceasefire, which was still fairly kind of, vaguely worded, but was a lot more punchy than anything that had been put up so far. Keir Starmer tore up the parliamentary protocol book along with the speaker and pressured the speaker into allowing the Labour motion to go through and get a vote first, which stopped the SNP one getting through. And even that again was all about, we condemn Hamas, and and yes, there must be a ceasefire, but pretty much, as long as Israel agrees, which is useless. They have, I don't know if you looked at any of the language. I think it was today made a comment and said that, the peace in the region depends on a safe and secure Israel next to a viable Palestine. Well, why not a safe and secure Palestine?
Whatever
because, if Israel can have that and we're treating people equally, then it's got to be both ways, surely.
Yeah, I think whatever Keir Starmer says, really, we can't believe him. Like, I can't remember a policy or a promise he has kept that he, or a policy point that he hasn't U-turned on. Everything's been U-turned on. Any hopeful or just policies have been scrapped. Anything, from investment in the green transition to Palestine. I mean, the guy's a human rights lawyer. He's presented cases to the International Criminal Court.
I don't think he ever made a promise he wouldn't break. And I mean, the Palestine one had only been in the, announced in the manifesto for a couple of days, I think, when he was already backtracking on that, which was appalling. So, I mean, I'm loath to step away from Gaza because it's such a crucial issue and the big humanitarian issue of our time. But some people in Edgbaston will no doubt be thinking, yeah, but what about the potholes and the bus services and so let's bring it down to kind of hyper local issues, if you like, at the moment. So what are the local issues that you are campaigning on, and how are you different from what the Labour Party is offering?
Yeah, so look, local issues obviously are very important, especially in this constituency, and there's a running theme in our constituency, which is crime. So on the streets, whether Edgbaston is actually a very diverse constituency. There's very, very rich areas and very, very poor areas, but no matter which part you live in, both are affected by crime. So daily when we go canvassing, we see cars that are stripped. All right, people tell us about burglaries and break-ins. There is fly tipping everywhere, and the council doesn't seem to act on it. I know that the council in Birmingham is under special measures, but what they've done is they've imposed efficiency savings on council services, and so refuse isn't being collected, and the council tax nonetheless has gone up. So I think the residents here, if I can speak on their behalf, I think what they would say is that the council services are really broken. They're not working, and it's a Labour-run council. and it's just, I think in one word, it's being described as incompetent to me. So these are the hyperlocal issues here.
Okay, I had a couple of questions coming in. One from Stop the Cuts UK, which says, what does this candidate consider the biggest threat to the NHS is currently? So from your point of view, what is threatening the NHS, and is it going to get any better if there's a change of government?
Yeah, the biggest threat to the NHS and other public services, but the NHS particularly, is funding. No doubt about it. Since the 2008 financial crisis, if you look at research, it's not my fact. It's not my opinion. Sorry, it's research done by think tanks. What they say is there's a £60 billion gap since the 2008 financial crisis to now. Okay, and the Health Foundation and the Nuffield Trust both have done analyses of the latest Labour and Conservative manifesto. And what they say, particularly about the Labour manifesto, is that actually it's going to put the NHS in a tighter bind than even at the height of the Conservative austerity programme. Now that should really wake us up. That should really wake us up. And what they predict is there's going to be another approximately 38 billion or 40 billion pound hole in the NHS's finances should another parliament elapse another 5 years. So putting that together, we're looking at maybe up to £100 billion in terms of deficit of funding in the NHS. So this promise that these major political parties are making of revolutionizing the NHS and improving it without investing, it's just a lie. Really, it's just a lie. And in my department, like I mentioned, 3-year waiting list, 12-hour waiting time in the A&E. This wasn't like this even 5 years ago. Things are getting worse and worse. If we do not invest in our health service right now, I think we can wave goodbye to the kind of health service we idealize, which is one which is free at the point of use for everybody and where everybody can get world-class treatment. I mean, already I would describe portions of the NHS's treatment as mediocre, unfortunately, and that is largely due to budgetary constraints. So the one issue has got to be investment, no doubt about it.
Okay. Now, my friend who's an NHS campaigner, Stop the Cuts UK, said spot on. So that's he likes that answer. Well, my friend who's an NHS campaigner will tell me off later if I don't raise the issue that, alongside funding, because if you put lots of funding in, but it all just goes out into private profits again, then, there hasn't been any gain really from putting those extra funds in. And both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party are committed to what they call integrated care, which started off as accountable care, but was, it's the same name that they used in the US for it. And when the bad publicity about that kicked off, they changed their name, but they didn't change the plan. And the idea with that is that they actually incentivize the so-called health providers to not provide care, and any money that they save is shared with them as profits. So they're actually, giving this perverse incentive to not treat people. And as a result, that's already rolling out, but it's rationing care. That's hitting, various places around the West Midlands and East Midlands that I'm aware of already, and pretty much all over, where they're boiling everything down to 40-odd hospital centres, essentially. And, and those are going to be harder and harder to access. So, and I think that, Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, has said that he wants to see more use of private provision in the NHS, which is exactly the same as the Tories. So, as you said, no more money, just just different organisation, which means more reform, which is what's turned the health service from the envy of the world in 2010 to something that's on its uppers and its last legs now. We've got a question in from Wandering Soul. What's your stance on building a greener society and protecting the environment?
Right. So just briefly about the privatization, just to make it clear, I do support resisting privatization of the NHS because in our experience, certainly in this country, private companies have promised big things, Circle being an example. But then when things go southwards, the NHS has to pick up the bill. And if there already isn't enough money in the economy and not enough money in the NHS, to add a line for profit naturally means that less care would be delivered. I'm not against companies that genuinely can provide value for care and increase quality, but it just hasn't happened. It just hasn't happened. And I used to live in America. In America, like, the bills are sky high, and but if you look at the outcomes of private healthcare, it's not much better. So I generally, as a point, I'm against privatization just for the sake of it. If there is genuinely some value and quality being provided, I think it has to be demonstrated first before we invest vast sums. But the Labour Party seems to have this mindset that privatization is equal to good. I think history, and the recent history, especially in this country, is borne out that that's not the fact at all, not the case. So in terms of green politics, it's very, very important to me. One of our key pledges is save our planet. And this is, again, one of the factors that pushed me out of the Labour Party. There was one hopeful policy that was just about keeping me in the Labour Party, and that was the promise to invest in the green transition with a 28 billion funding package annually. That actually was a hopeful policy that was promoted by the youth in the Labour Party and then finally accepted by Keir Starmer. And when that U-turn happened, it was just another one more disappointment. So for me, look, I think we need record investment in green technologies. And yes, there's going to be an upfront cost, like there is to all the other kind of things that I'm mentioning, but it's not money wasted like the 70 billion pounds that was wasted in the test and trace scheme by the Conservative government, or the 130 billion pounds they wasted in providing loans to companies, a lot of which was lost to fraud. Okay, this is investment, because once we invest in green technologies, the bills are really going to be rock bottom. So, for example, I drive electric cars, and to charge my electric car costs me between £1.50 for the smaller one to £3.50 for the bigger one. And on that, I get between 200 to 350 miles. So I've saved so much money on fuels, that purely on the economic argument, electrification wins. But also the ethical argument, obviously, the green policies win out on. So we need to invest in green technologies so that we can reap the rewards and benefit as a society in the short and long run. And it just seems to me that they've made this into a culture war, the Tories particularly, and Labour's going to continue this, it seems. And then they keep on talking about when the time is right, when economic growth miraculously happens, then we'll invest in these things which are really existential for our planet. And this is an existential threat that needs a response right now, today, because climate change is already something that's happening today. So that's a very important part of my pledge. Look, in terms of what I support record investment in green technologies. I support insulation of homes so that we stop leaking energy out into the environment. And I support an urgent deposit return scheme so that we can have an end to all of this litter in our street, and we can use all of the aluminium and plastic littering our streets to actually recycle into new produce without needing new raw materials for production. So yeah, that's my take on the green policies.
Okay. Another one from the same questioner, but I presume this is a very local issue because it doesn't mean anything to me. Can the candidate comment on the recent purge on closing care homes in Harborne?
Oh yes, absolutely. Right? That is. A recent gathering in the outside the Birmingham City Council, protesting against the cuts, which are impacting our libraries. So libraries are so essential to our communities, especially communities that are less well off. Like, I came here as a new immigrant to Birmingham, and I lived in Rotten Park Road, just around this area. And at that time, libraries were a way for me to get books, read, learn the English language, and progress. And undoubtedly, that learning has contributed to my success and to what I am today. And if you are middle class or if you're wealthy, then you can have your own library. But if you are a working class background or an immigrant background, you need to have public services for yourself. And libraries are key for that. And the efficiency cuts are closing down our libraries. Okay, that's just the library piece. And along this line, the efficiencies are affecting our local services, like I've described, but also it's affecting the care centers, right? So there's a particular subset of care centers called day centers, where people who are my patients, actually, so people who suffer with epilepsy, learning difficulties, and such conditions, they the carers for these patients during the daytime, they leave them at the day center so they can get some respite. And from the care that they provide. And these are long established relationships where patients would go and be looked after by a staff that they have looked after them for years, sometimes decades. And if you suffer with learning difficulties or autism, you need that regularity to be continuous. You need a continuously be looked after by the same people in the same environment. What the council is proposing is to shut down, of the, I think, the 9 centres they have, they're proposing to shut down maybe 4 or 5, so they can concentrate services in the remaining centres. But that's going to upset the routine of the patients. It's going to make their lives a lot difficult. And then what's not factored into all of this is the transport of the patient from their place of living to the care center and back. And the extra distance they have to travel is going to be a real nightmare for both the patients and their carers. So yeah, I'm in part of my pledge. You can read this actually on my website, ammar.vote. I am opposed to the shutting down of social care centers and day centers.
Very good. I'm just putting your website address there at the bottom for those who want to take a look. There's a question from Jenny Nolan. What strategies would Dr. Ammar use to increase public funds? I presume this means for the NHS or possibly generally. What does he think about Labour's plans for VAT on school fees?
Okay, there's 2 questions there. I'll quickly answer the second one first, because the first one requires a longer answer. Regards the Labour's plan for VAT on school fees, I think I'm not sure what's happening here with regards to that policy from Labour. I think they may be just feeding the left-wing base some indication that they're really progressive, but the reality is the people who purchasing private education, especially in this constituency, they're not all very wealthy. A lot of them actually are doing it out of desperation because the state sector isn't able to provide the kind of education that the children need. Additionally, there's people with special educational needs, children with special educational needs, that unfortunately, due to the very slow nature of making the diagnosis, getting all the paperwork and assessments done, parents don't have the time to work through all of this, so they end up sending their children to private education to actually have their special educational needs looked after. And these parents particularly are, again, not all very wealthy. Some of them, I've met some of them, are really stretching their budget, not going on holidays, selling off their cars, selling off assets so they can make this work. And by imposing a 20% VAT, these parents will undoubtedly have to think twice about sending their kids to the private institutions that are giving them education. So it'll be a real downer for them. But additionally, it's the nature of education. I think, if you leave aside the utilitarian argument, even if you look at the nature of education, I think the nature of education is something that shouldn't be subject to tax. I mean, for example, would I support putting 20% VAT on healthcare? And I know from my experience in neurology that a lot of people who consume private healthcare, people who just get desperate and can't wait. It's a thing in education. So I oppose 20% VAT both in education and health for that reason. Now, with regards to how would I raise money to fund the ticket items, well, there's 2 obvious levers that even the Labour Party knows but has chosen not to employ. The first one being a wealth tax. If we were to employ a 2% wealth tax on any assets greater than, let's say, £20 million, that would generate somewhere in the region of £22 billion annually. Okay. And then the second big lever that I'm interested in is reconfiguring corporate gains tax so that it's in line with income tax. And there's no reason why it shouldn't be. There's no reason why people who have huge dividends shouldn't have to pay the same tax that people who work hard to earn their money do. And if we did that, that would be an additional £15 billion annually. And they wouldn't dent the wealth that these individuals enjoy, but it would mean that the public sector can raise significant funds to provide for the least well-off. It's all about taking money from the very, very wealthiest, a small amount of money, but to the very, very less well-off. That means a lot. And we can provide public services for them. We can provide them support. And that's what I would want to do.
Okay, Jenny, liked your answers there. And one more from Wandering Soul. Can the candidate comment on the current housing crisis, particularly in the local constituency? Young people simply cannot afford housing.
Yes, this is a huge issue. Honestly, it is a huge issue. And again, I've experienced it on the doorstep. Look, I know that the social housing stock is inadequate and some of it is poor quality as well. And as a value, what I say is all homes, all housing must be of a good quality, especially social housing, and it must be safe and secure for everybody. Clearly, there's not enough homes, especially in a Birmingham. There's a huge issue. So I would support building more homes as well. Definitely, no doubt about it. As an independent, what I would do is I'd advocate for those issues and fight for those issues. Of course, I can't alone make a decision to have more housing, but there's something I would fight for and strongly advocate, especially in the social housing sector. And I would advocate an end to the sale of social housing as well, because I think that reduces the stock and causes problems uh, for the general population.
Okay. One in from Chris Perry, who would like to know what you would do about really bad mental health services.
Yeah, so mental health services are non-existent in the NHS. Honestly, they're almost non-existent. And especially if it's child and adolescent mental health services, that's particularly absent. And the result of that is patients waiting in general medical wards for sometimes weeks, waiting for a placement to come up. I think the solution to this again starts at funding. The reason that we're at this it wasn't always like this. This has become like this because we've stopped the facilities that provide mental health services for our patients, and we've stopped. At some point we stopped investing in it, and we made efficiency savings. So we have to reinvest. Mental health for me, as a neurology doctor, there's a lot of mental health cases that we see actually on our wards, and it's part of my practice. But I also know because of that the provision is entirely inadequate, and we need to invest significantly in mental health services, but also other issues like dentistry, for example. That's another huge issue in Birmingham. So I would be supporting investment in those and the rejuvenation of those services.
Very good. I'm going to let you go shortly because I know that you're still on the campaign trail and you've got other things you've got to do this evening. But I just want to quickly ask, out on the campaign trail, what kind of responses are you getting? Do you think there's a reasonable shot at defeating Labour in Edgbaston?
Look, I don't want to jinx anything, but by kind of saying something that is untrue. I really don't know. I really don't know. On the one hand, we've been to streets where door after door, people are extremely positive and supportive. And they, for example, they take our posters and display our posters. You can go to some streets and there's full of our posters. So that's very positive. But there's other areas where we knock on the door and people say, look, a politician or a political party hasn't knocked on our door for 15, 20 years. Why are you here? We're not voting. And some people actually appreciate that we've knocked on the door and they're more open to listening to us. But oftentimes people are like, I'm just disengaged from the political process. I'm not voting. Go away. Or they may say I'm voting reform, for example. So it's a mixed bag. But in certain segments, we have had a lot of strong support. So like I said, I don't want to say anything to jinx the result, but let's see. We've had a lot of strong support. I think there's a huge chance of us causing some sort of an upset at least. And I'll just leave it at that, I think.
Okay. Ammar, thank you for your time. Hopefully this is going to be useful for you on the campaign. And there'll be some people in Birmingham Edgbaston. Well, there's a couple of you, I think, that are already watching. And more people will get to hear what you're about. And no doubt after the result, if you get a good one, then we'll be in touch so we can get you on there as a first interview as the new MP. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and I hope it goes well.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Dan. Thanks for your time.